Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And today, Peter Engel and myself, Mihai, we are going to have a session of Q&A. Several people from the groups we are co-facilitating, or people that were watching the playlist of the videos called the Reigniting the Fragments of the Fourth Way. So we received some questions. So we are planning to answer them. And yeah, if you actually have a question based on the study of the fourth way, as well as, let's say, non-duality, yeah, feel free to send it to us as a comment here, or send it to my email or Peter's email that are here. And also you will have the playlist with the previous, I think, 10 episodes right here below, as well as the website where Peter has his books. Yeah. Also in January, we are going to start a fourth way study group for 9 weeks, and there's information here. Reach out to us if you're interested. So, some questions. So the first one that we got here is, can you please further differentiate awareness from consciousness? Sounds like they are different, with consciousness being total non-identification. So can you please further differentiate awareness from consciousness? Sounds like they are different, with consciousness being total non-identification. Want to start us off, Peter?
I think this is now a somewhat common question or familiar question, because of the fact that the fourth way uses the term pretty much exclusively consciousness when referring to higher consciousness, awakening, the real self, real I, all of that. It uses the word consciousness for that, whereas non-duality teachings use the word awareness principally. You do see consciousness, but it's more in terms of awareness, and awareness being aware. But I think in terms of addressing this question, we could say in simple terms, they're interchangeable. They are meant to represent the same thing. But the distinction, the important thing to understand, I guess, let's take away the term, let's take away the label consciousness, the term, and let's take away the term awareness. What is it that we're referring to in our being? This is what we want to understand. And so one way to intellectually explain it, so the mind can understand it, is that ordinarily we are conscious of or aware of things. I'm aware of looking at this device while I speak into it. But the consciousness or the awareness is in me, you could say, is not ordinarily by itself, let's say, aware of being here, while Peter is looking at the device and talking into and seeing Mihai's image in the screen and all of that. So the question comes down, are we merely conscious of things? Meaning in the outer world and also in our inner world, we're conscious of our emotions, we're conscious of our thoughts, of our sensations. Or are we simultaneously conscious of being the consciousness that is conscious of those things? Or are we the awareness that is aware of being aware of the things we are aware of? It's that word of. So the system teaches, and the non-duality teachings also teach, that consciousness is this purity of awareness. There's the word again. We're using them interchangeably, which is can be aware as itself without any identification with the body and the mind, and without a sense of identity in the body and in the mind. Ultimately, that's what all of these teachings are about, is the self-realization of that. And it means that consciousness realizes itself. It doesn't mean Peter realizes consciousness. We're getting a little confusing now, Mihai. I'll toss it back to you, but I wanted to just clarify that the distinction, the important thing to understand is, and you know what, Krishnamurti, I just remembered, had an interesting quote. He said, "Do you decide to observe, or do you merely observe?" And this is pointing to this idea. Are you just conscious of things and you're trying to be more, I'm now more conscious of things in my, or are you deciding to do that and use what you're aware of as a lever, like leverage, to be conscious, more conscious as you go about your life and look at your world? So does that prompt any other thoughts in you, Mihai, about how we might speak to this question? Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Well, I mean, yeah, it's important to realize that these are words, which are nouns, like a car and a body and consciousness. It's a noun. And by itself, actually, I think that this is the big limitation of the mind. The mind looks at things as objects. It's a somethingness. But in actual reality, there is no something. What I mean by that, like even if you see a tree and you call it a tree, oh, this is a tree. Hey, Jimmy, this is a tree. Little boy. Yeah, now you have this tree. But if we are really more aware, or if we kind of use scientific tools to really look at the tree, it becomes like it's a dance of particles that are ever changing and moving and unfolding. So it's better to call it like a treeing. And then you zoom into these particles and the atoms and electrons that are happening and unfolding. And it's an activity of treeing. So what I'm saying is that, from the very beginning, we use this consciousness, awareness as a noun, but it's kind of better to, it was useful for me at some point to realize that it's more like consciousnessing or awarenessing. It's the activity of being aware, whether we are the activity of being aware, either aware of paintings or aware of inner sensation, as well as the activity of being aware of sense of being. Okay, but we need to use words, and there are books, Gurdjieff wrote this book. It's very thick, full of nouns and objects. So yeah. So at this level, I totally equate that the term consciousness and the term awareness and the term being and the term presence and the term self, or the term the Atman, from Upanishads, the Atman, the Tao. All of this, they are all interchangeable, completely interchangeable. Some of them, they have a different, like emptiness, in the Buddhism. Also interchangeable, and each term can point to a slightly different pointer of it. So it's kind of sometimes useful. Like I keep looking at a certain term like this, and it gets a little jaded. And then I hear this other term, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. So it is interesting. Different traditions use different terms. But as it's very helpful as I was studying with Francis, Lucille, and Rupert, that all of these terms point to that, whatever it is, which is real right now. It's real, meaning it's not imagined. It's something which is real, which is perceiving. It's perceiving right now. It's perceiving whether we are, whether it is aware of itself or not, it is perceiving. And this perceiving is happening by itself. It's already perceiving, awareing. Like if you sit outside and I decide I don't want to see any bird, but then the bird comes and this is like it's being perceived, or like this. Awareness is that which is hearing this. Yeah. So, but to come back to what you are saying, yes, this presence or awareness, it's almost like has two channels. It can perceive content, can perceive stuff, can perceive images, can perceive sounds, can perceive bodily sensations and emotions. This is the channel that they are the most familiar. And then there's other more subtle channel where this presence becomes aware of being. It's aware of itself. Consciousness is aware of itself, as well as the so-called stuff. It's tricky here because all the objects are like a somethingness, like you can pinpoint them, like, oh, this is Peter's image. Oh yeah, this is something in my belly. Oh yeah, there's this thought that says, I want to be more aware, or I am not good enough. It's a thought. All of this can be pinpointed, even if it's a subtle object, can be pinpointed. You see it, bam, like a bird. You see a thought. They are pinpointed. They come and go. They have a beginning and an end. So when we are instructed about being aware of being, we use this method to try to find being as an object, and we are going to be perpetually frustrated. Yeah, so we can't be aware of that which is aware in the same way I'm aware of this voice speaking. So it's a subtle channel, and
it's beyond the mind. This is why it's subtle. This is why it gets complicated, because we keep trying to hold it. The mind keeps trying to hold it as another object. Yes.
The Lao Tzu, I think the first sutra, or I'm not sure how it's called, in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be put into words is not the real Tao. Yet the Tao is that which is hearing these words and consciousness, awareness.
And this comes back to identification. The question said, well, doesn't consciousness imply complete non-identification? And in a way, that's correct. Because pure consciousness, pure being, pure awareness, whatever you choose to call it, is in fact the complete absence of identification, which means now there's no longer this pull out to attaching to everything that is observed, everything that we're aware of, including ourselves, our own body and mind, or as the fourth way says, our four centers. That it's possible for awareness or consciousness to exist, we could say, in the dimension of itself without any attachment to this dimension. Still perceiving, still cognizant of this dimension, but not attached in any way whatsoever. That is, from one point of view, ultimate consciousness, ultimate awareness, ultimate being. And I say this because this becomes one of the approaches to, let's say, returning to that condition, is to understand what identification is and to learn to feel it in ourselves. I'm once again identified with something I'm observing, something I'm feeling, something I'm sensing. And then we have all of these reactions based on what we perceive. And then that becomes our life, and that turns into our psychology and our sense of identity, our sense of self. And it's all far removed from what we're trying to describe. This undescribable, this wordless, fourth way would call it a state, a wordless state. Other teachings might call it a wordless condition, an emptiness of being, a beingness that is empty and silent. So identification and consciousness are like opposite sides of the same thing. The more we become identified, the less conscious we are. The less conscious we are, the more prone we are to becoming identified. So the mind now can use this as a tool, and the mind can become a valuable asset, a friend in this regard. When we feel we are becoming identified, the mind can kind of put on the brakes a little bit and say, wait a minute, you're becoming identified. That's the mind talking. And it's even saying you are becoming identified. It's almost talking to itself, but it's meaning to almost talk to consciousness as like a friend of awareness, and say, all right, wait a minute, you're becoming identified. So trying to be less identified becomes an avenue, we could say, for consciousness to return to itself, to return to its pristine self, without attachment, without identification. And here's the tricky thing, without identity. Because we think of consciousness in terms of an identity. It's going to be my identity. It's going to be my new identity as consciousness. And it's not identity. And so this is where the nuances become more subtle, but also more simple. It's always that which is aware, that which is conscious.
Mhm.
And the question is, does it know that it's there? Words, words, words. Somebody who listened to these videos, Mihai, said to me, well, sure is a lot of words, Peter. And she was right. She's right. It is. It's a lot of words. Nevertheless, the words can help us used in the right way. And especially in the beginning, we're trying to introduce a lot of information. But it was good to hear her say that, because it's always a good reminder. Everything we say with all of these words, it's not that, there's something behind all these words. And it is very simple, and it is very pure, and it is very clear.
Yeah, this concept, this important fourth way term, which appears in, I guess, Buddhism or Zen or other things, this identification. I believe we have I think we have a 4-part talk about identification, identification with thoughts, identification with the emotions, identification with various things. So we recommend to check that out. There is a tendency, I think, for all of us initially to believe, even if we are not aware of this, that consciousness, that which is aware, it's a product of the mind, or it's a mind stuff. It's like a mind-like. It's different than, if I look at the mountain, if I look at the Himalayas, that's the mountain, and this consciousness is mind stuff. This is because we've been deeply programmed with this paradigm that the universe is made of atoms, separate atoms, and and then within this universe, this mammal arose, the human being, and somehow consciousness is a product of a complex brain, of the nervous system. So a complex brain produces consciousness. That's the paradigm we inherited, although nobody taught us this. But that's so. Therefore, consciousness is a product of the brain, and thus, if somebody hits you with a 2x4 over the head, then or the brain is crushed, then there's no more consciousness, and therefore we are afraid to disappear. So so one thing that I got from Francis Lucille is that consciousness is not mind stuff. It's more like a reality stuff. Consciousness is more equal to reality, and that's why he would say consciousness is the reality which is perceiving right now. And so, yeah. But we start at a much lower level. And if somebody comes to me first, I wouldn't talk to them like this, because this will encourage a lot of philosophy and a lot of abstract and being lost in the mind while being checked out. And so
this is why I appreciate the way Ouspensky introduced self-remembering before he even talked about his idea of divided attention, which that's sort of a technical breakdown from the mind's point of view of what self-remembering is or can be. But in the very beginning, he says simply, it's the realization of I and in this place. And this is a way to keep it very simple. We've talked about this before, Mihai, but without all the philosophizing and the emptiness and the awareness and trying to realize the reality of non-mind and on, right? Which is all true, but it can be hard for the mind to fathom. It can tie itself into knots with all of that in the beginning. But simply the realization you're here. This is the beginning, this is the basis. And in fact, it always includes this, no matter how expansive consciousness can become, it always includes this recognition of being here. And so quite simply, we can start by just noticing that we had not been noticing that we were here while we're living our life, while we're going through our day. And then suddenly, I'm here, I'm back. Yes, that's it. And it's just that moment of that flash of awareness. But what happens is right away, that produces a thought. And now when we are thinking in this way, and we have a moment where we're suddenly back again, we're more conscious for a moment, that starts producing thoughts. And sadly, but in fact, then consciousness collapses again back into thought. And we become a thought about, I came back. But that's how we begin. It's always a solid foundation. You can always rely on that no matter what's going on. Do you know you're here, right here? And even if that gets tangled up in the mind and in the body, if you keep holding to that, it will untangle itself by itself. And a pure realization of being will start to come into focus for itself as itself.
And I appreciate how in the fourth way, we are encouraged to observe this phenomenon of imagination or daydreaming. It's a state of being. It's an abnormal state of being, which has become so normal that in psychology, they don't even talk about it, because the psychologists themselves are in imagination all the time. So this state of being that consciousness is being somehow unaware of itself, unaware of being, and is lost in every thought. And actually, there are lots of thoughts, or what we call in the fourth way, eyes, thoughts, feelings, sensation, past, future. Was I okay? Did they like me? I want them to like me. I'm afraid. I'll just, oh, next time I should get this. So this, basically, this state, if we are in this state, there's nothing we can do. So that's why it's important to observe this abnormal state, and it gradually this. So we are not okaying it anymore. We are not okaying it anymore, and so this diminishes. And then, as this diminishes, or we have moments of just here and now, isness, or also as we meditate or something like that, there could be, or for certain breath work or certain techniques, the flow of the eyes slow down, or they temporarily stop, and then we have this experience of being, and there's no thoughts. There's no thought, yet it's obvious that, oh wow, but I say I am, but it's like it's aware, being aware of being, no thoughts. So this stuff that we are talking about are easier to understand, to grasp experientially, as we have a little bit less thoughts. Somehow it's almost like the sky. Consciousness, being aware of being, is like the sky, realizing that there is the sky, and it's hard for the sky to realize the presence of the sky if it's full of clouds. It feels like as if there's no sky and it's just clouds.